Some houses keep secrets. Some secrets live in the walls. I thought I just needed a quiet place to heal. But I didn't know I wasn't alone. Back in 2019, I rented a small house just outside of Austin. It was a decent place, cheap for the area, with a big backyard and an old oak tree out front. The landlord told me it had been sitting empty for a while, which didn't bother me at first. The price was right, and after a bad breakup, I needed a quiet place somewhere to reset, somewhere I could be alone for a while. The first week went by without anything unusual. I spent my evenings watching TV, cooking, and enjoying the quiet. The house had some Quirks doors that didn't quite close, right? A faint smell of dust and the occasional creak from the walls. It was old after all. I figured it just needed a little love. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to a strange noise. It wasn't loud, just a soft, rhythmic creaking coming from somewhere above me. Half asleep, I told myself it was the wind, or maybe an old pipe shifting. I rolled over and went back to sleep. The next morning, I forgot about it entirely. A few days later, I started noticing little things. The hallway closet door was slightly open when I was sure I'd closed it. The back door deadbolt was unlocked even though I knew I'd locked it before bed. At first, I thought I was just being absent-minded. I had a lot on my mind after all. Maybe I was just forgetting small things. Then one night I heard the noise again. This time I was fully awake. It was coming from the ceiling directly above my bed. A slow, deliberate creaking, like someone shifting their weight on old wooden beams. I held my breath, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. After what felt like forever, the sound stopped. I barely slept that night. In the morning, I grabbed a flashlight and went outside to check the roofline. That's when I noticed something strange. The small attic vent on the side of the house was slightly ajar, like it had been forced open. I told myself it was just loose, maybe a raccoon had found its way inside. I didn't want to admit it looked like someone had been using it as an entrance. That evening, I called the landlord and asked if there was any chance the attic had a pest problem. He laughed and said, "Not unless ghosts count. That place has been empty for 2 years. That should have made me feel better." It didn't. That night, I pushed a chair against the attic hatch in the hallway. I didn't have a ladder to check up there myself, but if something was coming down, I'd at least hear it. I also made sure every door and window was locked, double-checking every latch before I finally went to bed. Sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of something moving inside the walls. Not mice. Not the wind. Something big shifting just above me. Then I heard a faint but distinct scraping, like someone dragging something across the wooden attic floor. I lay there frozen, my eyes locked on the ceiling. My phone was on the nightstand, but I was too scared to move. Then the sound changed. It was no longer above me. It was moving down, following the path of the walls. Slow, steady. I realized with absolute horror that whatever was in the attic was coming down the walls inside the house. The scraping stopped near my bedroom door. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just listened. Then ever so quietly the handle twisted. That broke me. I lunged for my phone, hitting 911 as I scrambled out of bed, flipping on every light as I ran for the front door. The dispatcher picked up, and I barely managed to get the words out. I told them someone was in my house, that I could hear them. They told me to stay on the line, but I was already outside barefoot in the cold grass staring at the house. I watched as the hallway light flickered. Then, through the window, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The attic hatch, the one I had blocked with a chair, was open. The police arrived within minutes. They searched the house from top to bottom. At first, they found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No footprints, no damage. I could tell they didn't believe me, that they thought I had imagined it. Then one of the officers pulled down the attic ladder and climbed up. There was a sleeping bag up there, a small pile of food wrappers, empty water bottles, and worst of all, a notebook. Inside were pages of messy handwriting. Most of it didn't make sense. Gibberish, numbers, strange phrases, but one page made my stomach drop. He doesn't know I watch him sleep. I moved out that same night. The landlord called me a week later to tell me that the attic vent had been broken from the outside, meaning whoever had been living up there had been sneaking in and out while I was home. To this day, I check the ceilings of every new place I live. I double lock my doors even when I'm inside. And no matter what, I never ignore the sound of something moving above me in the night. Some roads feel lonelier at night, endless blacktop under empty skies. And sometimes, if you're not careful, you find something out there that was waiting just for you. A few years ago, I was driving from Fort Worth to El Paso to visit my sister. It's a long, empty drive, especially once you get past Abilene. There's not much out there, just stretches of highway scrubland and the occasional rest stop or gas station. I'd made the trip a couple of times before, and while it could be lonely, I never thought of it as dangerous. Not until this one night. I'd left later than I'd planned, hoping to knock out a good chunk of the drive before stopping somewhere cheap to sleep. Around midnight, I realized I was running low on gas. I wasn't too worried. There are enough stations scattered along I-20 that you're never completely stranded. I spotted a blue highway sign for a rest stop ahead and figured I'd pull over, stretch my legs, and check my phone for the nearest open station. The rest stop wasn't much, just a couple of vending machines, some dim overhead lights, and a single bathroom building. No cars were parked there, and I almost drove past. But my legs were stiff, and I needed to focus before finding gas. I pulled in and parked near the vending machines. For a second, I just sat there letting the engine idle. It was dead quiet, the kind of silence that feels too thick, like the world is holding its breath. I glanced at my phone. No signal. Typical. I got out, stretched, and walked toward the vending machines. As I dug into my pocket for change, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. My heart jumped, but when I turned, it was just a man sitting on a bench near the bathrooms. I hadn't seen him when I pulled in. Maybe he'd been out of sight. Or maybe I just wasn't paying attention. He was slouched over slightly, hands resting on his knees. His clothes were dirty, but not in a homeless way. More like he'd been out working all day and never cleaned up. His face was turned slightly away, but I could see his jaw moving like he was chewing on something. I hesitated, suddenly aware of how alone we were, but he didn't seem to notice me, and I told myself I was being paranoid. I fed a few quarters into the machine, punched in the code for a bottle of water, and tried to act normal. Then, in the reflection of the vending machine's glass, I saw him stand up. I turned slowly, pretending not to be bothered, but my pulse was hammering in my ears. He was staring at me now, his head tilted slightly like he was sizing me up. His mouth moved again, but there was no sound, just lips forming silent words. I gave him a nod, the kind you do when you pass someone in a grocery store, and grabbed my water. He nodded back, but he didn't blink. Something about him set me on edge. It wasn't just that he was staring. It was the way he held himself too still, like he was waiting for something. I suddenly realized that if he wanted to, he could block me from getting back to my car. I forced myself to walk casually toward the driver's side, my fingers tight around my keys. I could feel his eyes on me the whole way. Just as I reached my car, I heard a sound. something faint like a whisper carried on the wind. I turned slightly, pretending to check my phone. His mouth was still moving, but now I could hear it. "I knew you'd stop." The words were so soft, almost a murmur, but they hit me like a gut punch. I yanked open my door, jumped inside, and slammed the lock down before I even had the chance to breathe. He didn't move, just stood there, head tilted, watching. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. The rest stop lights flickered for a second, and in that brief moment of darkness, I swear I saw him take a step closer. The lights buzzed back on and he was in the same spot. But I wasn't waiting to see what he'd do next. I threw the car into reverse tires, screeching as I backed up. His face never changed. His lips never stopped moving. I didn't breathe easy until I was miles down the highway, my foot pressing harder on the gas than necessary. I didn't stop for gas until I reached a well-lit station near a town, people moving around a cashier inside cameras, watching everything. I never figured out who he was or why he was out there alone. Maybe he was just some guy high on something messing with me, but something about him felt deliberate, like he'd been waiting. And what scared me most was the way he spoke, not surprised, not curious, like he knew I'd be there. They say nothing bad ever happens in a small town. But sometimes it's the quietest places that hide the strangest stories. This one's mine. I grew up in a small town outside of Waco, Texas. One of those places where everybody knows each other and nothing much ever happens. At least that's what I used to think. When I was 17, I took a part-time job delivering groceries for a little family-owned store. It wasn't a big operation, mostly people calling in orders, and I'd drive them out in the store's old white pickup truck. One afternoon in late August, I got an order from a man named Dale Carter. The name didn't ring a bell, which was odd considering I knew just about everyone within a 10-mile radius. His address was even stranger, an old county road that didn't lead to much anymore, just empty farmland and a few abandoned properties. But I didn't question it too much. Some people liked their privacy, and it wasn't my job to be nosy. When I pulled onto the gravel road leading to the address, it felt off. There were no mailboxes, no signs of life, just overgrown fields on either side, and a house barely visible in the distance. The kind of place you'd assume was empty if you drove by. The house itself was weathered paint, peeling from the wooden siding, a sagging porch that looked like it hadn't seen company in years. There were no cars, no lights inside, just a screen door hanging half open, creaking softly in the breeze. I parked and grabbed the 2 paper bags from the passenger seat, hesitating for a second before walking up the steps. Something about the silence made my stomach twist. The only sound was the crunch of my boots on the porch. I knocked once, then again, a little louder. After a few moments, the door creaked open and a man appeared in the dim doorway. He was tall, maybe in his 60s, with a thin face and deep-set eyes that didn't quite match his polite smile. His clothes were old but clean-pressed slacks, a button-up shirt like he'd been expecting company. "You must be the delivery boy," he said, his voice smooth and calm. I nodded, suddenly aware of how dry my throat was. "Yes, sir. Got your order here." He didn't step forward, just held the door open, a little wider. "Why don't you bring it inside?" Normally that wasn't a problem. Some folks wanted help setting things on the counter, and I'd done it plenty of times before. But everything in me screamed not to step into that house. My hands tightened around the bags as I forced a polite smile. "I can just leave them right here on the porch," I said, shifting slightly backward. His smile didn't change, but something about the air around us did. He looked at me for a long, long moment, then nodded slowly. "That's fine. I placed the bags on the wooden planks, stepping back toward the truck as he crouched to pick them up. Before I could turn away, he said, "Not many people drive down this road anymore." I swallowed, unsure how to respond. "Guess not." He nodded again, then stood up straight, still watching me. "You have a good day now." I muttered a quick, "You too," before getting into the truck, my hands shaking slightly as I gripped the steering wheel. As I pulled onto the road, I glanced in the mirror. He was still standing there, just beyond the threshold, watching me leave. By the time I got back to the store, I had convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe the guy was just lonely, a little odd. But when I mentioned the delivery to my boss, he frowned. "We don't have a customer named Dale Carter," he said. I felt my stomach drop. "He called in the order," I said. He shook his head. "I take every phone order myself. That name's never come up." I pulled out the receipt, but my boss just stared at it, confused. The number written down wasn't one he recognized. When we tried calling it, we got nothing but static. That night, I couldn't get the man's face out of my head. I decided to do some digging, asking my grandfather if he remembered anyone living out on that road. He hesitated before saying, "There used to be a Carter family out there. But that house burned down years ago. No one ever rebuilt." I didn't sleep much after that. I even drove back to the area a few days later, just to prove to myself I hadn't imagined it. But when I reached the place where the house should have been, all I found was an empty field, overgrown and untouched. No house, no porch, nothing. I don't know what I delivered to that day, and I don't think I want to know. But I've never taken a back road delivery again, and if a stranger ever asks me to step inside, my answer will always be no. Some places never really feel like home, no matter how long you stay away or how many times you come back. For me, it's my mom's house. And every time I step onto that porch, I remember the night I wish I could forget. I haven't told this story to many people, mostly because I don't like to think about it. But every time I visit my mom's house, I can't help but remember that night, back in 2018. After she retired, my mom moved to a small town just outside of San Antonio. She found this old, slightly run-down house on the edge of town, the kind with a big porch that wraps around the front and sides. It had some charm, but it also had a crawl space. One of those dark, musty gaps under the house where pipes run and raccoons like to hide. She didn't seem bothered by it. But from the first time I visited, something about that space made my skin crawl. I figured it was just because I don't like tight, dark places. But I was wrong. It was around Thanksgiving when I came down to visit her for a few days. I'd gotten in late that evening and we stayed up drinking tea and catching up. It wasn't until close to midnight that I finally went out to my car to grab my bag. The night was quiet. Too quiet. Out in the country, you get used to weird animal noises whining through the trees, even the occasional distant bark from a neighbor's dog. But that night, nothing. As I walked across the gravel driveway, I had this sudden feeling that I was being watched. I stopped, glanced toward the trees, then back at the house. My mom had left the porch light on for me, casting a dim glow over the wooden steps. And that's when I saw it. A hand just barely visible poking out from the shadows beneath the porch. It was pale, thin, unmoving. For a split second, I thought it was a trick of the light, maybe a weird-shaped rock, a piece of wood. But as I stood there frozen, I saw the fingers curl slightly, then retreat slowly back into the darkness. I dropped my bag. I don't know why, that's just how my body reacted. Every nerve in me was screaming to run to get inside, but I was rooted to the spot. Then from under the porch, I heard the sound of something shifting, a slow, deliberate rustling like someone adjusting their weight in a tight space. I turned and bolted inside, locking the door behind me. I must have looked freaked out because my mom immediately asked what was wrong. When I told her, she frowned, not in disbelief, but in recognition. "Are you sure it wasn't an animal?" she asked carefully. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking. It had a hand. She didn't say anything at first, just pursed her lips and glanced toward the window. Then she sighed. "I heard something last night," she admitted. "Thought maybe I imagined it." That sent a cold wave through me. Heard what I asked. A scraping sound, like something moving under the house. I felt sick. She could see how freaked out I was, so she tried to reassure me. "It's probably just a stray. I'll call someone to check in the morning." But I wasn't waiting for morning. I grabbed a flashlight and my mom's old wooden baseball bat from the hall closet. My hands were clammy. My heartbeat loud in my ears. I could tell my mom didn't want me to go outside, but I couldn't not look. When I stepped back onto the porch, the night felt heavier. The air was thick, unmoving. I took a deep breath and knelt down, shining the flashlight into the crawl space. At first, all I saw was dirt and cobwebs. The wooden beams stretched back further than I realized, disappearing into total darkness. But then, in the farthest corner, the beam of light caught something. 2 eyes staring right at me. I didn't even have time to process before whatever was under there scurried backward deeper into the shadows. Not an animal too big. Too fast. I scrambled back, heart pounding, and slammed the front door behind me. We sat in silence for what felt like forever, just listening. Then faintly, we heard slow, dragging footsteps moving along the side of the house. Not running. Dragging. My mom grabbed the phone and called 911 while I stood there, gripping the bat, feeling utterly useless. The footsteps moved to the back of the house. Then nothing. Just that awful silence again. It took the sheriff's deputies about 20 minutes to arrive. By then, we hadn't heard anything else. 2 officers walked around the property, while another checked under the porch with a brighter flashlight. He found signs that someone had been there: flattened grass, disturbed dirt, a ratty old blanket stuffed into the corner. But no person. One of the officers told us it was probably a squatter, someone homeless looking for shelter. But I knew better. That thing under the house. It wasn't just hiding. It had been watching, listening, waiting. My mom had the crawl space sealed up the next morning. She had a contractor install a metal grate over every opening, bolting them down tight. I haven't seen anything like that since, but I can't shake the feeling that whoever or whatever it was wasn't just passing through. I don't tell this story often because it makes me feel stupid, but if it stops someone else from making the same mistake, then I guess it's worth sharing. This happened in 2020, right after things started opening back up. I was driving from Houston to El Paso, a long, boring haul that I'd made a few times before. Normally I'd stick to I-10, but I had a friend in Odessa I hadn't seen in years, so I decided to take a detour and visit him for the night. That meant hitting some of those lonely farm-to-market roads in West Texas. FM 181. If you've never driven it, is one of those roads where you feel like you're the only person left on Earth. It's mostly oil fields with long stretches of nothing but empty highway. There are a few towns scattered along the way, but they're tiny. It was late, maybe 10:30 p.m., when I saw him. A man walking on the side of the road. Now, seeing a hitchhiker out there isn't that weird. People break down, wander for gas, or just have nowhere else to go. But what made me slow down, what made my stomach drop, was how he was walking. His stride was too steady, too deliberate. Most people walking along a highway in the middle of nowhere look tired or lost. This guy, he looked like he had somewhere to be. And he was barefoot. I was already uneasy, but I was also raised to be polite. So when I got closer, I slowed down a little, not enough to stop, but enough to get a better look. He was tall, maybe mid-40s, with long, unkempt hair and a sunburned face. His clothes were dirty, like he'd been outside for days. And his hands were weird. They were clenched too tight, like he was gripping something that wasn't there. And then he turned his head fast and locked eyes with me. I swear to God, I have never seen someone's face change like that. His whole expression snapped from blank to furious in an instant, like I had just personally offended him. His lips curled back, baring his teeth. And before I even had time to process what was happening, he lunged toward my car. I floored it. I don't remember making a decision. I just remember my heart slamming against my ribs as my tires screeched and my engine roared. In my side mirror, I saw him running after me, his arms pumping like he actually thought he could catch me. And for a second, just a second, I was sure he would. Then just as fast as he started, he stopped. I glanced in the mirror again, and he was just standing there in the middle of the road watching me. I kept driving. Didn't stop. Didn't call anyone. Just drove until I hit Odessa, shaking the whole way. I told my friend what happened, expecting him to laugh. But instead, he went pale. "Where exactly did you see him?" he asked. I pulled up a map and pointed to the stretch of FM 181. He exhaled slowly. "Dude, that's where they found that missing oil worker last year." I felt a chill go through me. "Found?" I asked. "What do you mean found?" "They never did," he said. "His truck was abandoned out there. They found his boots a few miles away, but that was it. I didn't sleep that night. And I have never taken a back road in Texas after dark again."